and in this conversation with Borch, I want to talk in Polish.
Yes.
I know everything about Polish version, and when I read English, it's like,
Who is that?
Okay.
Hey, who is that?
I don't know anything now.
Yes.
Welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from GoodMorhen, and I'll be your host as I and our international hanza accompany Geralt of Rivia and his destiny, Cirilla of Cintra, across the continent. I can't believe we're kicking off our next book in this episode. Now that you and I have gotten to know each other and gotten into the swing of things, I'd appreciate any feedback on the content of the show or its online incidents. What do you like? What don't you like? What do you want more of in the episodes or on social? Feel free to reach out with thoughtful feedback via Instagram or Facebook at Breakfast in Beauclair, Twitter DM at Beauclair Palace, Reddit at rthehanza, or good old-fashioned email at greetings@breakfastinbeauclair.com. As our hanza grows, one of my hopes for the next few months is to create a vibrant community within the listenership, and as a listener, I'd love your help to do so. You can get involved in the conversation and make new friends with Witcher content creators and other listeners through Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit. Who knows? Maybe you'll meet them in person in a country neither of you is native to for a 4-day, all-day Witcher-themed excursion. Speaking of internet friends, I'm excited to introduce Will P., a member of our international hanza who's become our newest patron on Patreon. Shout out to Eugene, aka Pony of Coins, who joins our producer-level patrons, Louise of Covier, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise, Cool Guy Henry, Eric the Godling, Katie, the Redhead of Dusant, Jacob, Mahakam Elder Joe, Julie, and Sylvia of Skellige. As producer-level patrons, they receive an introduction shout-out, a spot on the website, monthly bonus content, stickers, a t-shirt, an exclusive producer gift, and producer credits in each and every episode. If you'd like to explore becoming a patron of the show, head over to patreon.com/breakfastinbeauclair. As for this episode, we're joined by our Polish friends Anita and Karolina of Witcher Kitchen to discuss the first short story from Andrzej Sapkowski's Sword of Destiny, The Bounds of Reason. Together, we'll explore themes such as Sapkowski's weaving of existing legends of basilisks and Smok Wawelski into his short story, Arthurian legends as visual inspiration for the Witcher universe, insight into the origins of Yennefer's character, and an unexpected dissertation on the history of potatoes. During the mid-episode break, Larson Witcherflix returns with a boatload of quotes from recent interviews with the cast and crew, which give us insight into the character and production processes. Without further ado, let's get to this episode's short story, The Bounds of Reason. Welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair. My name's Alyssa, and today we're joined by our friends Anita and Karolina of Witcher Kitchen from Poland. Hey guys!
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Nice to meet you, the audience.
Could you tell us a little bit more about yourselves and your project?
Yes, of course. Our story is quite interesting because the first encounter was caused by Witcher-inspired recipe. Yeah. I was doing my blog about food in video games and I posted about food design in games and so on. Someone from my followers asked me about recipe for Mahakam potato soup from Season of Storms and I told him, sorry, I'm not making food from books, but I can help you with that. So I googled some Polish recipe and I encountered Karoline's blog and I really liked it. I really liked the photos, the recipe, so I just contacted her and then we figure out we live very close by, like 40 kilometers only, and we decided to meet during some fantasy convention in Poznań, Poland. It's called Percon and it's all about fantasy stuff and it was the beginning of our common story. That's how we decided to establish a separate project dedicated to Witcher cuisine, so we call it Witcher Kitchen.
That's so nice.
Yes. Our project is just about food from Witcher's universe based on both books and video games, because there's a lot of food elements and inspirations. We just want to invite the community for a culinary journey for Witcher's universe and help them transform their kitchens into an inn filled with scents and taste of the universe.
Yes, and most important for us is also educate them about Polish cuisine and Witcher cuisine, because it's connected with Andrzej Sapkowski. Yeah,
with his roots, yes. All the descriptions he provided in the books are very specific, or very connected. Not only with Polish cuisine, but also European ones, but that's basically what we're doing.
Awesome. Could you tell me a little bit about how food plays an important role in the Witcher universe, in both the books and the games?
So, Caroline, maybe you'll take the part
now.
Okay.
Cuisine is very important and shows how our characters feel, what they think. We think that it's very important to characters and the bond. People not very know about it because they think it's only a background food.
It's described more specifically.
More specific.
Yes, when it comes to bonding.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting, yeah.
Yes.
And we have examples from Baptist on Fire.
Yes.
My favorite.
Baptist on Fire, when you have a fish soup.
And in Season of Storms you have...
For example, lamb baked with eggplants, goose thighs in white wine, baked fruits, and so on.
And when you have Question of Price,
where the feast takes place, when the deputation arrive, and descriptions are rather general. They're not so specific as in the cases when people are gathering, talking. And in fact, Sapkowski writes very specific when it comes to direct conversations.
Yeah, and for example, we can know that some characters like Lambert can't cook very well. Yeah,
they're always complaining about his
skills. Yeah,
because I'm more into video games, so I can tell you about the food design there and what is the role. It's not only about mechanics in games, not only about boosting or replenishing your health, but it also has its part in storytelling. For example, you have various quests with Kira Metz and her beef, with Arikanian spices and wine from Zubaran. Dandelion mentions that he loves, for example, rabbit with thyme and rosemary. We have some quest when we get some baked apples from an old lady. Then we have Millie and her aunt Lucy with Slavic pancakes, and they're called podpomyki. It's about the Polish cuisine, the real Polish cuisine, and we don't have a direct translation for it in English, so we just call it Slavic pancakes. They're made from wholemeal flour and water, basically, and some oil.
The Slavic pancakes is example about bond between games and books, because it's a traditional Polish cuisine. And in books, we have, for example, long driver soup, zupa flisacka in Polish. And it's it's present only in Polish lands, and it's connected with people who transport
on the river from the upper parts to lower parts of Poland.
It's something cool for us in book and in the games. We have this connection with traditional Polish cuisine.
If we gather some people in the scene, they're talking about food, they're enjoying it, they're bonding. Like in real life, it just brings us all together, I guess, in a very nice way.
Today, Anita, Caroline, and I will be discussing The Bounds of Reason, the first short story in Andrzej Sapkowski's Sword of Destiny. Part 1 starts, while Geralt hunts a basilisk, a curious man and his Zaracanian escort defend the Witcher's belongings from thieves. The man, Borch, also known as Three Jackdaws, invites the Witcher to dine with him at a local inn, the Pensive Dragon. So when we're dropped into the story, we hear from a lot of other people who are waiting outside of a dungeon for the Witcher. The local people are just arguing over who should take his stuff, basically.
Filthy thieves.
Yeah. They're trying to rob him while he's down there because they assume that he's dead.
The first creature encountered by the Witcher in this story is a basilisk, and it's one of the two examples of cultural reference to Polish legends transferred to the Witcher's universe, but of course in some changed form. In Poland, the legend about basilisk is quite popular. It says that in some Warsaw ruins in the basement lived a basilisk, which turned people into stone. There are many legends about this creature, in fact. Various characters play the roles of main heroes of these legends. Sometimes it's a tailor, once it's a guy called Jan Ślązak, who's wrongly accused of murdering his companion, and another time it's just a brave girl named Magda. Regardless of who fights with the creature, it's always defeated in the same way, by looking at its own image in the mirror. And in the story, local people gathered before the cave are suspecting that Geralt is probably already dead because he didn't have a mirror.
Oh, yeah.
And in the Sapkowski book, we have that quote about killing these monsters at the beginning of the story. One of them said that the Witcher probably will be killed because
he doesn't have a mirror.
Yeah. I think that was in Lady of the Lake.
Mirror is not necessary because you cannot fight basilisk with mirror because it's just, some legend.
Yeah.
And it's not really working. You can only smash his head with the mirror, not just to show it to him because he won't turn into stone as the legend says.
Yeah.
And this is that little connection between our Polish legend and this part of the book.
Yes, this story, which we are discussing right now, it's full of connections with Polish culture and so on. We can tell you more about it later.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love about having you guys on, is that I'm just learning so much and I'm just sitting here with a big grin on my face. The local people are stopped, though, by a stranger with thick, curly chestnut hair who's wearing a dark brown tunic over a padded coat and high riding boots, and he was not carrying a weapon. These two women come out from, the shadows of this dungeon, and they're described as flashing their teeth and narrowing their eyes, from whose corners broad tattooed stripes ran toward their ears. The muscles of the powerful thighs are visible beneath the lynx skins wrapped around their hips, and on sinuous arms naked above their mail gloves. Saber hilts stuck up behind their shoulder, which were also protected by chainmail. These people defend the Witcher's stuff, and then the Witcher comes out, sees the scene, and then all of a sudden chaos unfolds because even though the spotty-faced man and the butcher try to run away, one of the Zerrikanian women beheads the spotty-faced man, causing complete chaos and everyone runs away. So that's the setup in the beginning of part 1.
Yeah.
After everyone scatters, the stranger introduces himself as Borch, also known as Three Jackdaws, and then he introduces the Zerrikanian girls, Taya and Vea. Borch invites the Witcher out to the Pensive Dragon. The Witcher says in reply, "Borch, I wouldn't want anything left unclear between us. I'm a Witcher." And Borch responds, "I guessed as much, but you said it as you might have said, I'm a leper." The Witcher responds, "There are those who prefer the company of lepers to that of a Witcher." Three Jackdaws laughs and says, "There are also those who prefer sheep to girls. Ah, well, one can only sympathize with the former and the latter. I repeat my proposal." A theme that we've talked about continually throughout our discussion of the short stories, there's always tension and uncertainty around the perception of Witchers on the continent. And Geralt is acutely aware of the way that people treat him. And again, he's a little concerned about Borch inviting him out. And then Borch just kind of laughs it off.
And that's suspicious.
I guess we can go up to part 2.
Our favorite one.
Yeah.
Because it's about food.
So in part 2, while dining at the Pensive Dragon, Borch and Geralt discuss the nature of Witcher's work, the balance between the forces of chaos and order, and dragons. For you, Anita and Caroline, this is, as you said, your favorite part because it centers around a meal. So could you tell me a little bit about the meal that's here and what it means for you guys and for the books as a whole?
Yes, of course. So basically they ordered some beer, eels with garlic and olive oil and vinegar, some pickled green peppers, rafting soup, like zupa flisacka in Polish, so it's still the connection with our Polish cuisine, and transporting goods through the Vistula river. Also ordered some roasted lamb with onions, some crayfish. Sapkowski did focus on the crayfish because they are mentioned a few times during this feast. Zerrikanians are eating and, the butter is melting.
They're meant to be super erotic.
Yes, very. If you associate some seafood, butter and so on with some sexy things, you can just imagine it. Because it's, it's normal at Sapkowski's book, so we are just used to that.
Yep.
And we love how he connects both these things because food as well can be sexy. For me, food is sexy because it always makes me so happy. They also ordered some sheep's cheese and lettuce, as we read. The menu is quite broad. The mentions about food are very specific, so we can think about how this bonds them together and how this helps them chat, how this helps them discuss the things that are emerging through their conversation. It's a very important part of this conversation when they are in the inn. So it's not only a background, but something that adds a flavor to the conversation. You liked my joke.
It's very cheesy. Oh man.
Oh man, we can go for a whole evening.
Just with food puns, yeah.
Yes, but I really like it. Food puns are the best. What more can we add about this conversation? Caroline, do you have something in mind?
Geralt have this specific point of his view about good and bad things. Sapkowski create a very deep and complicated character. When we first meet the Witcher, we think it's only monster killer and he has no feelings. Now we know that Geralt is more complicated. It's not very easy to convince him about order in the world.
Yes, with his moral codex.
This specific moment is for Borg when he decided that Geralt will be his friend.
Yes, and I think the food helped them much.
Yeah, of course.
It was always the food.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot here in terms of exposition and the conversation between Geralt and Borch. As you said, Caroline, Geralt's moral shift after the lesser evil, specifically in the story with Renfri. Borch, over dinner, gets into a conversation with Geralt about chaos and order. Borch says, the conflict between the forces of order and the forces of chaos. I imagine that you carry out your mission defending people from evil always and everywhere, without distinction. You stand on a clearly defined side of the palisade. Geralt responds saying, the forces of order, the forces of chaos, awfully high-flown words, Borch. You desperately want to position me on one side of the palisade in a conflict, which is generally thought to be perennial, began long before us, and will endure long after we've gone. What, in your opinion, defines the border between chaos and order? A very simple thing, Borch responds. That which represents chaos as a menace is the aggressive side, while order is the side being threatened, in need of protection, in need of a defender. The whole conversation about this will kind of circle back a number of times for both The Witcher and for Borch, but this is kind of where that theme starts. And being at dinner really gives them the opportunity to get to know each other more.
Yeah, get some chill and take up some heavy conversation about some heavy topics.
Yeah.
Because still conversation about chaos and order is not the daily conversation, I guess.
As you said, it's very deep.
Yes.
And the two of them definitely get into a lot as they're cracking crayfish and like juices are spilling all over their mouths.
And you're just getting hungry when you're reading it. And still, I can tell you about the crayfish, because here in Poland, some years ago, my parents told me once they were just going to the lake, catch some crayfish and eat them. Nowadays, it's more prevalent in restaurants, in some luxury restaurants. Still, it's based on our culture because we ate a lot of crayfish from the lakes. So it was very basic food. They were just going to the lake and catch some crayfish, make it with butter in a big pot and so on. And the crayfish were screaming.
Oh no!
Yes, my parents told me this. I remember.
Oh no!
Yes, but still, they were very tasty and juicy, as Sapkowski wrote. So that's totally true about our cuisine and also based on it. So
yeah, I know that you mentioned that Sapkowski often kind of sneaks in bits of Polish cuisine. So
still, the cuisine Witcher is not only about Slavic and Polish cuisine, and it's a very common misconception about that. It also has some connections to Western Europe, like Toussaint, France, Belgium, some Italy as well. And for example, Skellige is more like Nordlings, like the northern parts. So it's a mix of everything you encounter in Europe through different centuries, because still in Europe, for example, we didn't have potatoes.
okay.
It came to Europe in 14th century, if I'm not wrong. Then for the 1st century, people thought it's poisonous.
Oh, okay.
Like potatoes are poisonous. Some king decided to change it. So he made up some story about that, but I don't remember. It was an interesting story about potatoes, and still Sapkowski thrown in the books potato as a ingredient, because we have, for example, Mahakam potato soup. But still, in the Europe, in 13th century of 12th century, there won't be any potatoes in the real life.
This is not the only example of words that don't fit, right? The word king in the Middle Ages
didn't exist.
Yeah,
right?
in Europe.
Yes, so it's a mix of centuries, not only about Slavic, and this is a very common misconception about that, and we hear it a lot, like, oh, Witcher is Slavic, but it's not exactly. It has some features from the Slavic creatures and so on, but still not only.
Witcher is more like King Arthur. We have some part from Slavic mythology, but not exactly everything, because, for example, leshys, leshys in Polish.
Yes, so it's a creature from the forest, the king of the forest.
Yeah, and for example, he can be good and he can be a bad person, and in the game, for example, he's bad. It's not our Polish Slavic leshys, because in one interview, Sapkowski says that inspiration Russian poetry, Pushkin, and it's actually Russian creatures are different than in Polish part, because we have 5-6 different leshys. This is wrong when people said that, oh, this is Slavic mythology, because it's very different, and we have that little part about legends. This is a great example, in my opinion, that Sapkowski's book is a mix of Europe.
So it's basically a mix, not only Polish, but it's easier for us from Poland to imagine it. All like Slavic things, fields, all the regions we have here. Because we always hear from our friends from the foreign countries, Poland looks like a game, like the Witcher game.
Yeah. I think this is the cool, because now people interesting about Slavic culture. It's sort of forgotten in Poland. And it's now live again, but it's not right to say that, oh, this is Slavic mythology. For example, now we're waiting for the next leaks, and series. Everything said about it. I don't see Slavic culture, I don't see Slavic climate, and I think, why? Do you read the books? I don't want to say that this is a perfect proposition, but when you want to imagine a Witcher book in a movie, I think the right inspiration is Guy Ritchie, King Arthur.
People shouldn't associate the series, how they should look, with the game. It's more like Arthurian legends.
Okay.
And the Guy Ritchie's film, not only about the game which we seen from the CD Projekt Red. It's a different, let's say, imagination of the universe. And it shouldn't look exactly like this. So the associations, of course, they could be here, but still, it's not how it should be depicted entirely.
Okay.
That's what you want to say?
Yes.
Okay.
So as you guys have been telling me a little bit about the Slavic origins and the European origins behind Sapkowski's work and the stories, within the universe, we start to hear a bit about dragons. Specifically, Borch starts kind of quizzing Geralt on dragons, and Geralt tells the reader there are 4 different kinds of dragons. Borch says there's a 5th dragon. Geralt kind of brushes him off, saying, you know, I've heard about those ones too, golden dragons. Golden dragons are mythical creatures, fabled, like the phoenix, let's say. There are no phoenixes or golden dragons. Borch responds a bit later, I think that every myth, every fable must have some roots. Something lies among those roots. And Geralt says it does. Most often a dream, a wish, a desire, a yearning. Faith that there are no limits to possibility, and occasionally chance. One of the last things that we get in this section with Borch and Geralt is Geralt's sterile.
Yes.
He has a very brief conversation with Borch about this, and it actually becomes very crucial not only to the short story, The Bounds of Reason, but also to the premise of the saga as a whole. We'll get into the details of why that is. Here, Geralt and Borch are still kind of coming off of their discussion about the possibility of a golden dragon. Geralt is kind of a Debbie Downer about the whole thing, and, you know, he's saying golden dragons and other similar mutants, were they to exist, couldn't survive, for a very natural limit of possibilities prevents it. Borch asks, what is that? And Geralt says, mutants. Mutants are sterile, Borch. Only in fables survives what cannot survive in nature. Only myths and fables do not know the limits of possibility. We learn here for the first time that Geralt is sterile.
Yes.
And is a point of contention for Geralt. I think it says his jaw twitched when he was talking about it. So it is something that he's probably a little self-conscious about, his own legacy or his inability to have children, something along those veins where it kind of gets at him.
Yes, and it's kind of a motivation for him through the books, I guess.
That's a little sneak peek.
Yes.
The end of the second part, it's quite a funny ending. Borch at the very end of the chapter asks the innkeeper for a tub, like specifically one that you launder clothes in, and the innkeeper asks how big, and Borch says for 4 people. Borch, Geralt, and the Zerrikanian girls are implied to have a very fun night in this tub together.
Yes, but we don't know the details.
We do not know the details, but Sapkowski does leave it to our imagination.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes. They probably went to sleep in this bathtub after eating so much food. That's dangerous.
Maybe, and then just got super wrinkly. Oh no.
Yeah.
Before we continue with the short story, we're going to hand it over to Lars and Witcherflix for recent news on the upcoming Netflix show. When we come back, Anita, Karolina, and I will continue our discussion of The Bounds of Reason.
Hey, it's Lars from Witcherflix, and this is Tidings from Toussaint. These last 2 weeks were full of interesting interviews from the crew and awesome promo pictures. But let's start this episode with the best news ever. The Witcher has already been renewed for a 2nd season, even though the first one has not even been released yet. Showrunner Lauren S. Hissrich announced season 2 will also consist of 8 episodes, and the scripts are already finished. Production will start in early 2020 in London, UK. This is great and shows that Netflix is very confident when it comes to The Witcher show. As I said, many interviews with actors and producers have been released during the last 2 weeks. In an interview for Netflix Italia, Lauren Hissrich talked about several scenes from the recently released trailer. For example, she talked about the monsters on the show. She said, "It's funny because monsters are huge in The Witcher, but it's actually one of the things we were trying to hold out of the teasers and trailers as much as possible, because we think there is a great element of surprise for existing fans who don't know what stories and monsters we're playing with. And also there's a couple of new monsters we've come up with based on a lot of Polish folklore." But she also added, "I don't feel the need to shock the audience. These stories are engaging enough without pushing the shock value for the audience." Henry Cavill was also interviewed. He said some interesting things about The Witcher during his interview with news sites Vivorcha.pl, Teleshop.wp and Smallscreen. First, he explained what makes Geralt and the books so special. He said, "He's the kind of guy who will kill you if you mess with him. If you mess with those around him, he will kill you. But at the same time, he will put his own life in grave danger to save a complete stranger from harm. And there's something wonderful about that." About the books, he said, "I fell in love with reading those stories. They're not your typical fantasy stories, there's something tangible about them. Many times after reading or playing the game, I couldn't get them out of my mind. When the opportunity to play Geralt appeared, I couldn't let it go. When they announced the show, I didn't know Lauren will be working on it. Every day I asked my agents to find something out. And then we had a meeting, and I think it went well, since I'm now here with you." Henry Cavill was also asked about his favorite Witcher books. He answered, "I wanted Geralt to meet the rats, but it never happened. There are many more examples of that. And my favorite books? Well, it's The Last Wish, because it hooked me, broke my heart, put it together and then broke it again. And Lady of the Lake, because all its events are unbelievable. There's real magic in it." Executive producer Tomasz Baginski also talked about Henry Cavill as Geralt of Rivia. In Hungary, he spent weeks sleeping in a trailer right by the set. He didn't go back to the hotel in Budapest, which saved him an hour every day. But mostly it meant that during the whole time he was in the Witcher world. That doesn't happen very often. Henry is a working actor. He knows what to do and he delivers fantastic scenes. You see, he's more than dedicated to his role, and this is absolutely awesome. Moreover, Tomasz Baginski also talked about the never-ending comparisons to Game of Thrones. He said, "What differentiates us is the presence of magic and humor. There's not much of it in Game of Thrones. Magic is rather subtle there, while we use it heavily. It's intertwined with the story and we're doing our best not to make it into a gritty medieval drama. Sometimes there's humor, there are laughs, and I think it will be very much appreciated by both the book fans and new viewers." In other news, many more promo pictures have been released during the last 14 days. Visit breakfastandbeauclair.com to have a closer look. To get you hyped, there are beautiful new pictures showing our main character Geralt, Yennefer and Ciri, but we also got a closer look at the mage Stregobor from the short story The Lesser Evil, the show-only character Ser Laszlo in a beautiful piece of armor, and close-ups of Queen Calanthe of Cintra and Nilfgaardian Vicovarian Knight Kahir. Last but not least, Mahesh Jadoo, who will play the infamous mage Vilgefortz of Roggevin, was confirmed to appear on episodes 7 and 8 of Season 1, right on time for the big battle scenes. In addition, there are more interesting confirmations. Visual effects supervisor Julian Perry confirmed that the Djinn from The Last Wish will make his appearance and will say hello to Geralt, Jaskier and Yennefer. Moreover, Artorius Vigo, Fringilla Vigo's father, will also appear on the show. He will be played by English actor Terence Maynard. Gamers know Artorius Vigo as the creator of the mystical Land of a Thousand Fables from the Witcher 3 expansion Blood and Wine. Guys, that's it for today. Only one more month to go until we finally have Season 1. Anyway, we'll talk again in the next episode of Breakfast in Beauclair. Until then, thanks again for listening and good luck on the path.
Hey everyone, welcome back from the break. I'm here with Anita and Caroline of Witcher Kitchen discussing The Bounds of Reason from Andrzej Sapkowski's Sword of Destiny. When we left off, Geralt had met a new companion, Borch, also known as Three Jackdaws, and a Zerrikanian escort. The four of them had dined at an inn and gotten to know each other before spending a fun night together in a tub. In Part 3, Geralt, Borch, and the Zerrikanians are stopped at a bridge in Bearfield and asked for letters of safe conduct to pass. Unexpectedly, Dandelion also happens to be stuck outside the bridge as well and tells the company a dragon appeared outside Bearfield and began terrorizing the pastures. A local cobbler, Sheepbagger, poisoned the creature, and now the young king Nidemir, Lord of Caingorn, is after it for reasons of state. Knights, dragon hunters, dwarves, and sorcerers have joined the hunting party, including Geralt's old love, Yennefer Vengerberg. Borch bribes the Decurion, and the company makes their way across the bridge. Geralt, Borch, and the girls have had this fun night. They're trying to kind of continue on their journey. They run into Dandelion, of all people, just stuck and unable to cross this bridge in Bearfield on the Bra. Every time we see Dandelion, we get a fun little description of him. Geralt knew that bonnet and that feather, which are famed from the Burina to the Yaruga, known in manor houses, fortresses, inns, taverns, and whorehouses, particularly whorehouses. Dandelion asks the Witcher why he's there, and the Witcher responds he's traveling with Borch. Dandelion says, "Oh, you're not in pursuit of the dragon." So Dandelion, after a bit of fuss, tells the Witcher and his companions a dragon was poisoned by a cobbler named Sheepbagger outside Bearfield, but now there's a king of Caingorn who now wants the dragon for reasons of state. This young king, Nidemir, took a nearby town, Mallory, by force. The people of Mallory basically said, you can't be our king unless you have a dragon, and no one had seen a dragon in years, so they thought they were safe. But then news about the Bearfield dragon got out, and Nidemir was like, well, if I capture this dragon and present it to them, they have no choice but to revere me. So it's a little bit convoluted. So now this young king's in pursuit of this dragon.
And I think this part is also a good part for Dandelion in Polish Jaskier, because I think he's the spirit of this book.
Yes.
He's a comic relief.
Yeah, in Poland we have so many memes about him and his relations to Geralt.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and when Dandelion comes, it will be a fun part of book.
Yeah.
Yes, always some comic reliefs.
Anita and Caroline, you guys both also had a note about dragon motifs in The Witcher.
Yes. So we have a next connection to the Polish legend, which is about Wawel dragon, Smok Wawelski, in Krakow. We have a cave with it, we have a statue there.
Castle?
Yeah, we have a castle, you can visit all those things here. We later in the story know how they cope with the dragon.
Yes.
And it's a connection to the legend because we had a shoemaker and he stuffed the sheep with silver and feed it to the dragon. Mm-hmm. And the dragon ate it. Then he just felt that something is burning him from the inside. So he drank a lot of water from the river and he bursted.
Oh.
Yes, so it's a quite funny legend, but we see a connection here about stuffing the sheep and the one method to kill the dragon by sheep beggar.
In Polish, kozojet.
I'm not sure why they translated it that way, but anyway.
Does it mean something different in Polish? Or is it kind of a weird literal translation?
We don't know. Okay. Something about the goat? So eating goat, I don't know why it's like this. But anyway, it's a connection to the legend of Smok Wawelski and stuffing sheep with sulfur to kill the dragon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
In the text, this person, kozojet in Polish, talking very much about killing him again with the same method. And someone said that he must stop talking about this method of killing dragon because maybe he become a legend.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's only a legend about Wawel dragon.
Yes.
I think as Sapkowski does, we can see a translation and a bastardization of an existing legend or story or folklore here.
So maybe go back to the story.
Okay.
Because we could talk for hours.
I mean, I don't mind. King Nidamir wants to get this dragon, but obviously he's not going to do it himself.
Coward.
Yeah, he's not rushing to stick himself into armor with like his own sword and try to kill this himself. He basically sends out riders with safe conducts throughout the countryside, and they recruit a bunch of dragon hunters. So Dandelion tells Geralt that there's a few people, the first being Ike of Denesle, who's apparently this super religious, super pious knight whose goal is to just slaughter everything, but like with virtue and with religion. So he seems a little holier than thou. Geralt admits that he's very good, but that he also doesn't take money for it. Geralt says, like, he spoils my business, the swine. There's also the Crinfried Reavers, who are a trio of brothers, and they've wiped out the Draco lizards and forktails in Redania, along with 4 different dragons. There's 6 dwarves under the command of Yarpen Zigrin, a dwarf. The Stikirian steps in, who they've been talking literally over as he's been kind of making a crude drawing of a woman in the sand. And he says, you know, a dragon's a magical creature. If there's anyone who can take care of a magical creature, it's a sorcerer, and it's going to be the sorceress that rode through yesterday. The Decurion doesn't remember who the sorceress is, but he says that she had black hair and a black horse. So they're trying to figure out who it is. Dun, dun, dun. The Zeracanians come. Borch had sent them off earlier in the part to get some beer for them. They come back with a rider on a large war horse. The rider introduces himself as Dorigare, who's a sorcerer. Dorigare identifies the sorceress with black hair and a black horse as Yennefer. And Geralt switches, but at the mention of her, he tries to bribe the Stikirian with 200 lintars, and Borch butters him up, and then eventually bribes him with 500 lintars, and they go across the bridge. In part 4, Geralt, Borch, and Dandelion chat around the campfire with other members of the hunting party, specifically the Reavers, the Dwarves, and eventually Yennefer. The Reavers, the 3 brothers, Boholt, Gar, and Kennet, who is also known as Beanpole, which is a bit of a funny nickname. And then we also hear from Yarpen Zigrin and his dwarves. They tell us about what it's been like riding with King Nidamir, this agreement they have to split up the spoils from the dragon. Whoever kills the dragon gets half of the share. Nidamir gets a quarter no matter what. The last quarter is divided amongst everyone else who helped. So that's supposedly the agreement they had, and they're just kind of filling Geralt in on what the dynamic has been between the king, the sorcerers, and the dragon hunters themselves. Eventually, Yennefer arrives and starts a conversation, and it's very clear that all of them have animosity toward Yennefer. They're very aggressive toward her, really.
Because they're afraid. They're afraid of her skills.
Yeah. I mean, eventually it angers her enough that she walks away, and Geralt disappears and follows her, which is when we get to part 5. Geralt follows Yennefer away from the camp for a private word. We get so much here in their dialogue and then also in the undertones of what they're saying to each other. You know, it starts off, Geralt tries to make some small talk, and he just says, "You haven't changed at all." Yennefer sneers and says, "Neither have you." And in both cases, it is equally normal, or, if you prefer, equally abnormal. In any case, the mention of it, though it may not be a bad way to begin the conversation, is meaningless. Am I right? She has no patience for Geralt.
As always.
She's that kind of woman.
Yeah.
Wonderful woman.
I like her.
We get this one line, too, that reappears throughout the chapter. You know, as Sapkowski likes to do, he repeats direct dialogue and themes. Between Geralt and Yennefer, this phrase, "in spite of everything," comes up throughout the chapter. Specifically, Yen gets angry at Geralt, like, why did you follow me? Why did you decide to join this hunting party? And she says, men like to meet their former lovers, like to relive memories. They like to imagine that erstwhile erotic ecstasies give them some kind of perpetual ownership over their partner. It enhances their self-importance. You are no exception, in spite of everything. And she continues by saying, those 4 years left their mark, Geralt. I'm over it now, which is the only reason why I didn't spit in your eyes during today's encounter, but don't let my civility deceive you. The Witcher tries to cut in, saying Yennefer, but she cuts him off. Be quiet. I gave you more than I've ever given any other man, you scoundrel. I don't know myself why I gave it to you. And you... Oh no, my dear, I'm not a slut or an elf woman met by chance in the forest who can be discarded in the morning, walked out on without being woken, with a posy of violets left on the table, who can be made a mockery of. Beware. Utter a single word and you will regret it. We've met, that's too bad, but we shall not make a spectacle of ourselves for anybody. We shall save face, we'll pretend to be good friends, but don't be mistaken, Geralt, there's nothing between us now. Nothing, understood? And be glad of it, because it means I've now abandoned the plans which, until recently, I still harbored regarding you. But in no way that means I've forgiven you. I shall never forgive you, Witcher. Never. It's a lot, and it's very, very tense. They both seem to have a lot of emotion around the ending of their relationship.
Yes, and they have reasons for it.
Yeah, and I think
Definitely.
Yennefer is a very strong character, but inside she's actually a very soft woman who cares about family. Actually, we can tell you why this situation is right in this style, because we have some information from interview with Andrzej Sapkowski that Anita tell you, translate perfectly for information I prepared.
We can add the fun fact that Yennefer was supposed to appear only once, and Sapkowski didn't really plan to use her in the next books, at the beginning at least. However, as he states in one of the interviews, she stick to his pen, let's say. She was very interesting for him as a character.
We have also some information about this too, and I think it's a very, very logic, and I understand more this relationship and more understand Yennefer. And I hope people have a new light about this character, because so many people, I don't like Yennefer, she's a bitch.
She's a bitch, yes.
She's a bitch, yeah. And I think she's a strong character with family problems. And now Anita, tell you more about this.
Yes, I will just read the direct translation from the interview. When Andrzej Sapkowski was asked, please tell me why such an important issue as story and psychological reasons for you that Geralt and Yennefer couldn't have children. And he replies, I could have let it go, like the character of Yennefer, but somehow it came out at some point. In the first story, Yennefer takes participation in the hunt for the dragon, so I needed some reason for which she claiming to be someone better, even an elite, like somewhere more important than common folks. And I was looking for a simple, legible and the real cause of the conflict between her and Geralt. I didn't have much time for the decision because stories are not written for years, like books, he says. So the introduction of the sorceress woman was aimed at breaking or bending the regular convention the reader always has. A woman appears and the reader, raised on the classic patterns, is convinced that she will become a reward for a warrior, for someone who will defeat the dragon. And suddenly it turns out that Yennefer is not going to be anyone's reward, but a warrior herself. And from this beginning, the fate of the relationship between Geralt and Yennefer just emerged. And although the story didn't have to continue from the initial story, and Sapkowski didn't know if he would ever use it again, this character of Yennefer, or would she do what she had to do in this story and then will just disappear from the rest of the saga. And some heroes, however, created as one-time episodic, stick to the writer's pen, as he mentioned, and he wants to spend some time with them, in short, because they're just interesting. And Yennefer and Geralt, in this case, are symbolic contrasts, like black and white, yin and yang, for example. And there's some kind of visualization of opposites to help the reader understanding this conflict, which is full of violent love. Basically that.
Yeah.
Andrzej Sapkowski especially he always mentioned woman is always a prize for the man, and now he create a very strong character like Yennefer.
No one expects this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although they are strong character, strong woman, they have a very simple problem. Like for Yennefer, is that she can't have a child.
Yes, she can't have. So it's a really simple problem, let's say. Like normal common problem, but for her is a life disaster, let's say, and it's her reason to go further.
Right.
And to make some things.
I think that's interesting because, of course, Yennefer is not very charming person.
Yes, not very charming at the first glance.
But I
let's
think
say.
her point of view about family and people she loves.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's just harsh, not bad person.
Yeah.
And people always have some misconception about that. I think it's very harmful for this character.
Yeah.
Her reasons and her beliefs and everything she does, it's based on the very good cause. Yeah.
Yes, and now in this part we know now, thanks to Sapkowski interview, that this relationship is not only some relationships in Geralt life or Yennefer life. For the beginning to the end, create a couple, a family, with problems, of course, but it's a family. In next books, we know this is not a random reason.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's really wonderful to have additional insight from the author. So thank you so much for bringing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
We're happy we could add it to the story.
I think you're both very correct. You know, Yennefer and Geralt are definitely two sides of the same coin. They do share a lot of the same problems.
Yes.
Things like infertility. There's a lot about, you know, the perception of them in the rest of society. So for Geralt, it's about witches as a whole, but for Yennefer, it really is her personality, how she comes across, and her status as a sorceress evokes a lot of animosity from the Reavers, from the dwarves.
Yes. So she's a woman, she's a sorcerer, she's, the cause of the problems.
Yeah. Yeah, and like their professions as a witcher and a sorceress definitely isolates them.
Yes.
Constantly around people, but they always feel, I think, a sense of isolation from everyone else.
Yes.
So I think it's very interesting to see kind of how much tension their relationship has and how much, they hurt each other but care about each other.
Yes, at the same time.
Yeah. We'll learn a lot more about Geralt and Yennefer's relationship as the rest of the short story goes on and as the saga as a whole moves on. Before we get to the hunt for the dragon, we're going to put a pause on this short story and this episode. So that is it for our show today. I'd like to thank Anita and Caroline for joining us for this discussion, and thank you to our Hanza for listening. In the meantime, you can find Anita and Caroline at their projects Witcher Kitchen and Nerd's Kitchen, in which they create cuisine inspired by the Witcher universe and various virtual worlds. Check out witcherkitchen.com and nerdskitchen.pl, or find them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Their YouTube is amazing. Look up Nerd's Kitchen and check it out. Next episode, when we return, Anita, Caroline, and I will continue our discussion of the bounds of reason. Thanks for joining us at the Breakfast Table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and a complete list of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastandbeauclair.com. Breakfast and Beauclair is created by Alyssa from GoodMorhen. It's hosted by Alyssa with the Tidings Which You Saw news segment by Lars from Witcherflix. The show's edited by Alyssa with the Breakfast and Beauclair theme by Mojo Filter Media and the Tidings Which You Saw theme by Bettina Campomanes. Breakfast and Beauclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City with Louise of Covier, the owner of the Trailer's Porpoise, Cool Guy Henry, Eric Sgodling, Katie the Redhead Toussaint, Jacob Mahakam Elder Joe, Julie, Sylvia Skellige, and Eugene, aka Pony of Coins. Special thanks to Anita and Caroline for joining us for this episode, and our international Hanza for their support.